you, Eric. As Eric just mentioned, my name is LaVon Bracy Davis. I am indeed the chair of the Florida Council on Arts and Culture with Florida Division of Cultural Affairs, and I am a newly appointed NASA board member. I'm also employed at a performing arts center in Orlando, Florida. It is a real pleasure to see all of you all today, and I'm so thankful for NASA giving me this opportunity. We all know that arts organizations have had a rough 13 months, even more so for those reliant on people coming through the doors to view productions, exhibits, or participate in other events. With increasing vaccinations and audiences already beginning to reemerge, we can see some light at the end of the tunnel, and I am so excited. So today we will discuss what that world would look like. How do we attract audiences back to public spaces? What do they need to feel safe to watch or engage or participate in a group arts experience? And that is the question we put to Impact's experience. They have access to data from the largest continuous survey of perceptions and behaviors concerning museums, zoos, aquariums, symphonies, and other cultural organizations. They have agreed to share some of their freshest finds. So I'm not going to do a whole bunch of talking. Without further ado, I'd like to turn things over to them so they could walk us through what they have found. It is my pleasure to introduce Colleen Dilenschneider, Chief Marketing Engagement Officer and author of the Know Your Own Bone blog, and Jim Hekkers, Chief Strategy Officer. Colleen, Jim, take it away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, first and foremost, we are so excited to be here. We have so much data to share. And before we get started, we just have to say, of course, the biggest thank you to LaVon Bracy Davis, to Eric Giles, to everybody here, for all of you taking the time to be here today. As you all know, there's a lot going on right now. We're in a little bit, just like LaVon mentioned, we're in a bit of a transition space, right? In between where we were last year when the pandemic was at its height to now as vaccinations are rolling out and people are a little bit antsy and they're starting to make their plans and secure their intentions to revisit cultural institutions again throughout the United States. So on that note, Jim, Bethany, and I are going to go ahead and share some research with you. So who are we really quickly? Well, we just had a very nice introduction, so we'll keep this brief. But so you can hear a little bit from the three of us. This overly excited millennial before you, my name is Colleen Dilenschneider. I am the Chief Market Engagement Officer at a company called Impact's Experience, and my job is essentially to be a glorified data nerd. It's to take high confidence research and make it accessible to cultural organizations, zoos, aquariums, museums, botanic gardens, symphonies, theaters, ballets, and the like, and make it accessible to leaders like yourselves so that entities can thrive in two capacities. One, in achieving their missions, and two, in securing business solvency, which is especially important right now during the pandemic. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Jim.
Hi, I'm Jim Hekkers. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Impacts. My job is to, first of all, I'm the white beard of the team. And my job is to try to show people what this means. What does the data actually mean in terms of strategy? My experience was about 30 years in the nonprofit world, mostly with major aquariums, including 15 years as the managing director of the Monterey Bay Aquarium. But I've worked for the past 6 years with Impacts Research, working with Colleen and Bethany to bring this incredible rich data to organizations like those that you all represent. And my goal here will be to try to just provide some insight on what the data means in terms of how you put it into action. So on that note, I'll turn it over to Bethany.
Hi everyone, I'm Bethany Gottschall. I'm Project Coordinator at Impact's Experience. I will be mostly in the chat today. If you have a question in the moment about what we're looking at on a slide, pop that in the chat and I will do my best to help you out. I will also post some links within it, although don't worry about trying to keep up with those. I'll send Eric a reference sheet with everything that we share, so you'll have it later as well. So, looking forward to it.
Good. So here, let's just talk just a minute about what impacts experience actually does. We're, as Colleen said, we're a market research firm, but our specialty is market research for cultural organizations. And what we try to do is help organizations understand the perceptions, behaviors, barriers, and motivations, not only of people who are visiting, but just as importantly, people who aren't visiting. We've worked with organizations in both the exhibit-based organizations as well as performance-based. We worked for aquariums, we've worked for art museums, natural history museums, we've worked for symphonies, orchestras, and operas. We have a really broad range of experience, and we're really, really looking forward to diving in and providing you some really solid data. But first, Colleen is going to tell you where the data is coming from.
All right. This is a little bit like getting on a cruise. We're about to share with you a lot of high confidence research, but before we get on that wonderful cruise, we have to board the ship, right? Not the most fun part, but absolutely necessary when we're talking about data. So let's onboard you for what the data that we'll be going over today, where it comes from. Well, it comes from 3 sources. The first is that Impacts is in market monitoring perceptions and behaviors related to 224 cultural organizations in the United States. As I mentioned before, there's a broad range of organizations represented here, also rural, urban, performance-based, exhibit-based, and depending, one of the reasons why this is so exciting for us is that we are able to look into certain trends for certain kinds of institutions and really dive in and go deep on some of the findings that we're seeing in regard to specific things. Yeah, so we're excited about that. The second place that the data comes from is a study called the National Awareness, Attitudes, and Usage Study. And if you read our website, we are grateful to have a website called Know Your Own Bone. And if we've had the great honor of you having heard of us before, it may be because of that website. And if you are a reader of Know Your Own Bone, which makes high confidence data accessible to cultural organizations every other Wednesday, then you are well aware of the National Awareness, Attitudes, and Usage Study. It's believed to be the largest in-market survey of perceptions and behaviors surrounding cultural organizations in the United States. So far, it's over 159,000 individuals strong. It's a very big survey, and it would not be possible without many of our incredible partners, the biggest of which are university partners who help us with a lot of our modeling. We do a lot of advanced survey methodologies, delivering things in multiple languages in multiple places so that we can make sure that we truly have representative sample sizes and some high confidence and very high confidence research. So many thanks to our partners, and this is just a few of them, but these are the ones that are particularly helpful or responsible for the data that we're able to bring to you today. And finally, of course, a big thank you to specific impacts partners who have been partnering with us specifically related to situations regarding COVID-19. Of course, just like all of you, we had to pivot, right? Are we all so sick of that word? We had to pivot just like you. And because of course, some of the questions that we were asking, what was the best part of your experience? It's harder to ask that question when institutions are closed, right? So you have to start asking and integrating new questions to get to the root of behaviors and expectations. So big thanks to our partners who funded that.
Okay, so I mean, this has already been said at least 3 times. This has been a weird year, and actually it's been a weird more than a year, right? Because we're not out of it yet. Although, as LaVon said, there at least, hopefully there's some light at the end of this tunnel. But look at all the things we've had to deal with. I mean, this has just been incredible. I don't think there's been a year like this ever, and like last year ever. We had the virus, we had layoffs and furloughs and all kinds of organizations. People were shut down. We had to learn words like social distancing. You know, we've had to struggle with mask mandates, uncertainty for everywhere we looked. At the same time, we've had incredible social issues that have impacted us. It's been quite a year, and quite a 15 months. And so what we hope to do is to bring you some data that will help you make some sense out of where we're likely headed. I mean, that's our goal. We're going to be future focused here. And we've got data about exhibit-based organizations and performance-based organizations. Now, the thing is, that not all organizations are facing exactly the same level of challenge. And in fact, these two different kinds of organizations, performance and exhibit, really don't have exactly the same challenges. In some cases, some of these things are worse for one than the other. But what we want to focus on today is really those shared trends, those trends that apply to both exhibit-based and performance-based organizations. So with that, we're gonna zero in on the data and really get focused here. And to do that, Colleen is going to describe what's on the agenda, as well as ask you a question or two. Colleen.
All right, so here's what we're going to be talking about. All right, so look alive. These things sound boring, but they're not. They're terrifically and exciting in our nerdy sample set, in our nerdy opinions here. We're going to be talking about market potential and what are realistic expectations for 2021, right? Like, we have high hopes, but what is the modeling? What is the structural equation modeling really suggesting is the actual market potential for both exhibit and performance-based institutions in 2021? And how is demand being redistributed because of the coronavirus? Then we're going to talk about what people say will make them feel safe, current trends that we're seeing right now during this in-between time in regard to travel, and some things that are different right now than what we all were used to in 2019 and before. And then finally, we're going to talk a little bit about a big change maker, which you're all aware of. We're going to dive deep to it and validate some of your suspicions that right now digital engagement is particularly important, and specifically finding ways to leverage it to better execute both our missions and our business opportunities, or our organization or nonprofit opportunities, our government agency opportunities. Whatever opportunities we face, how can we make sure that we're as healthy as we can possibly be? So on that note, Bethany, take it away with our first poll. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Almost put the wrong one up. All right. When do you think attendance is going to recover to 2019 levels? Get back to normal. I'll give you a few minutes to answer that. Put in your guess. Okay.
And we should say projected to recover to 2019 levels for the United States. So not necessarily for your specific, not that any of you are thinking that we're talking about your own specific organization, but just to clarify, when attendance is projected to recover to 2019 levels for the industry on the whole and for arts organizations.
Great. Give you a couple more seconds. Got almost everybody in. All right, count 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Sneak your last guess in. All right, let's see what we think.
All right, our winner. These are great. These are really great. You guys are looking, you have your expectations are aligned. The answer to this question, it's very close. We are going to achieve very close to 20. It is projected right now, if things go as planned with the vaccination, that we're projected to recover to 2019 attendance fully in 2023. But we should be pretty close by the end of 2022. So we'll show you the data. Let's dive in. Oh, so let's talk about market potential. Now, this is probably the mathiest few charts that we're going to show you in this entire presentation. So listen to the sound of our voices. We're going to make it as clear and easy to understand as we possibly can, and of course dive in from there. But we're going to start with the orange bars. We're going to start by talking about exhibit-based cultural institutions, and then we're going to change to a blue chart, and we're going to talk about performance-based institutions, right? Because they're a little bit different here. So what you're looking at here is a market potential analysis related to on-site attendance. Or attendance to culture, or is perceived as attendance to cultural organizations. So that also doesn't just mean, so if you are a performance-based institution, when we get there, it's anything that's kind of branded of your organization that people, when they go, perceive themselves as visiting or attending that. And I mentioned that for performance-based institutions because some of you are doing more out of your usual places, going to parks and doing things like that right now too. So let's get back on track for exhibit-based. The lighter orange bar here is the projected attendance of what things were projected to look like before the pandemic in January of 2020, before we knew the phrase social distancing. what things look like, and 100 is 2019 attendance. So another way to read this is it was projected that for exhibit-based cultural organizations, by end of year 2020, they were going to have a 0.7% increase in attendance compared to 2019. At the end of 2021, they were going to have a 2.2% increase of attendance. And by 2022, they were going to have a 3.7% increase in attendance. Now you have so many thoughts. You're like, why is this going up so slowly? I would have thought it'd be skyrocketing. Isn't supposed to go up over time. Actually, this is pretty darn good. One thing that you may all be knowing is that our communities, our nation is growing increasingly diverse with people who it's our charge to let them know that we are welcoming to all of these individuals. And so the reason it's going so slow is because, it's not going so slow. From a data informed standpoint, it's going pretty well. But the reason it might be perceived as so slow for some people is because we are trying to re-engage audiences at a faster rate than traditional audiences are leaving the market via death, relocation, or migration. So it's a displacement of audiences and welcoming new audiences at a faster rate than current audiences are leaving. So that's why it goes up potentially slower than you might have thought. But what we really want to talk about here is what happened in the projection for January 2021. So this is the projection as of January 2021. And we found that for exhibit-based institutions, they achieved 40.5% of their 2019 attendance and all of the revenue implications related to that. The projection right now is that exhibit-based institutions may reasonably achieve, if vaccinations go as planned, may reasonably achieve 72.2% of their 2019 attendance by end of year 2021. And by end of year 2022, 98.8% of 2019 attendance. So what this means is that we'll be very, very, very close to recovered right now as of where things stand by end of year 2022. Now, it's important to show you this data because it's important to set realistic expectations, right? Now, this is a benchmark for all culturals, for all exhibit-based culturals in the United States. Your own institution may have market potential higher or lower than this, but this is a reasonable benchmark for you to save or for you to have your institution save to consider how they are performing relative to the opportunity in the United States, given the external environment and how museums and exhibit-based cultural institutions are evolving over time. So it may come as a surprise to some, but again, being realistic is important so we can develop strategies to keep surviving and then working on thriving during this continually challenging time. And there's some good news here. As vaccinations roll out, it is projected that more people will be attending, right? That's probably not surprising, but it's really good and it's validating to see the data, right? What we're seeing is as this vaccination is rolling out, institutions by quarter are going to get closer to what they achieved in 2019. So a way to look at this data is in fourth quarter of 2021, exhibit-based institutions are projected to achieve 94.5% for that quarter of what their attendance was during the fourth quarter of 2019. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, this data does not mean that you'll necessarily have more and more people over time. Again, it's percentage of attendance compared to that same quarter in 2019. As many of us know, for many institutions, the third quarter can sometimes be a particularly popular quarter and a more highly visited quarter than the fourth quarter. So it's really compared to that same quarter of 2019. And this is good news. This is good news for us because it shows us an indicator that we're going to keep talking about, which is that people are making plans. They're making plans to come back and visit us. And indeed, it is happening slowly. We're not necessarily seeing that we're going to see a super bum rush on any given date, but it's happening. And this is a really good thing that we like. But let's talk about performance-based institutions. Now, it's the same thing here. That lighter blue line is what projections were as of January 2020 if the pandemic didn't happen. Now, this is a whole other talk. Let us know if you want us to come in and do this whole other talk, but right now we'll just hit on it. Why was that number going down for performance when it was going slightly up for exhibit? What's going down for performance because we know that the kind of people who tend to have interest and actually visit performance-based institutions tend to be older, and less diverse than people on the whole who visit exhibit-based institutions. And as I mentioned, our nation is growing increasingly less white non-Hispanic, which is a primary shared characteristic among all cultural institutions, and particularly a top shared characteristic for performance-based, which is an opportunity for us to overcome. And that's why that was slowly going down over time, because we have that opportunity, or even before the pandemic, we already had that opportunity to engage younger, more diverse audiences with performance-based institutions such as symphonies and operas and ballets, a little bit more than was previously existed for exhibit-based institutions. So that's the first thing to acknowledge. But then we also want to acknowledge that things were not as great, of course, as we all know. For performance-based institutions in 2020. On the whole, they achieved 22.8% of attendance. And this keeps in mind, as I mentioned before, those institutions that, like LaVon's, pivoted and moved things outside. She mentioned to us before we started that her institution was agile enough to move some of their programming outside. So this also contemplates just your usual programming, those that have been able to have experiences, but also those that have pivoted in new and exciting ways. So again, that's 22.8. We're projected to achieve 70 or 57.7% of 2019 attendance in 2021 and 92.3% of 2019 attendance in 2022. So again, showing you this because it's really important to consider realistic expectations, and also so that you all have this baseline to share with your institutions. So this is a very important thing to kind of same page. And here's some good news again. For performance, it's also going up and to the right. We like this. We like this trend. This is a good one we want to see. Want to check this one and make sure it's indeed going up and to the right here. So which types of organizations are people planning to visit and currently are visiting? And when do they plan to attend? Well, let's talk about dun, 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 redistribution of demand. This won't surprise many of you at all. When the pandemic happened, there were people who were interested in doing certain things that took their demand, or the things that they were interested in doing, like say, for instance, going to a movie theater, and decided to take the time that they might spend seeing a matinee, going to a park instead, something that's outdoors, something that was having programming, something that allows for social distancing. So what you're looking at right now is we asked people who told us that their normal activity was taking part in each of these things. So there are a little bit different samples in each of these things. The same person who goes to a sports arena isn't always this person who says that my regular thing that I do is go to a zoo or go to a botanic garden. So we asked the people who said, everybody who said a regular behavior for me is going to a public park or going to a botanic garden, or a regular thing for me is going to the zoo. And we said, given the pandemic, how likely are you to return to your normal activities, the normal rate of activities of how much you participated in that leisure activity before the pandemic? So what that means is our baseline is 50. 50 would be if the pandemic didn't happen. So everything that's above 50 is benefiting right now from a positive redistribution of demand. In other words, people are choosing to attend those kind of institutions or have those kind of experiences compared to those that are below 50 right now. So you can see right now, there are a couple things here that are pretty interesting for us, is that you can see that these things are pretty good for some of you, right? So for museums, so for art institutions, those of you who some of your agencies are, you're working with galleries, you're working with museums, we're seeing that things are a little bit up right now for museums. This doesn't mean that these, things are necessarily able to be realized at the same levels. People still want to get vaccinated, and we're going to talk about that in a second. But what that means is that as people are planning, there's a redistribution towards certain institution types and away from others. And you can see some trends here. Those that are experiencing a positive redistribution of demand are those that tend to allow perceptually for social distancing, freedom of movement, and are perceived to be outdoors. Now, there's a creative solution for some of you, which I know that firsthand that some of your institutions are already doing, which is moving things that are perceived to be exclusively indoors, outdoors, especially if you're in an environment or a weather a place in the United States where the weather will allow for that. So you can see some hints here for some programming opportunities in the future as we think about the next couple of years until we can get back to that 2019 attendance level at the end of year 2022 / start of 2023. I want to pause. Bethany, any questions that we're getting in the comments right now that are worth pausing to talk about before I move on about this one?
We did have one asking to elaborate on the inclusiveness of our data sources. Maybe if you want to say, I put a little bit of this in the chat, but if you want to say a few words about what the NAAU contemplates and how it's representative, that may be helpful to address.
Yeah, absolutely. So the NAAU, we work with Caltech and Stanford to make sure that the NAAU is representative of the United States. And what that means is that we are investing to go into places where voices aren't always heard, in communities where people aren't currently collecting information. And our data is based in market research as opposed to audience research. So what that means is we're going out into the entirety of the United States, and it isn't just, hey, tell us. For some of the data it is, like for this one, this is cut for people who say that what they normally do is take part in these activities. A lot of the data that we have is for people who have interest in visiting but haven't. And also we collect a good amount of research on people who don't have any interest in visiting cultural organizations at all, so that we can better understand their behaviors. We collect our data via 4 methodologies, via online. We're doing a lot online right now because meet people where they're online. We're doing a few, but not nearly as many on-site intercepts. That's a bigger thing. That was a bigger thing before the pandemic, but we're deploying it right now as things are starting to pick up. We're doing random digit dialing on mobile and also random digit dialing on landlines. And there are a whole bunch of corrective things that need to happen on all those fronts, because of course the people who have a landline, that's a type of person. A person who's going to fill a survey on the internet through certain methodologies, that's a type of person. So there's a lot of corrective procedures to make sure the data is representative. In nearly all places, we're deploying the data in at least 2 languages, but in some places we're deploying it for up to 5, but that's very few places. So it's mostly 2 to 3 languages as needed in order to get a representative sample. Jim, is there anything that you'd add to that?
No, that's a good description. Yeah, I mean, the main thing is that it is in fact representative of the US population.
Mm-hmm. Unless it's something like this, where I'm telling you, these are people who say that they're regular activity. So this is cut for people who are telling us that they're regular activity. And you'll see that a lot throughout the presentation, is there are different sections of people that we're questioning for different things. All right. I love a good data question. Now, this one's also really data-y, so bear with me here. The reason it's data-y is because it requires a little bit of explanation. What you're looking at here is we want to understand when people intend to visit cultural institutions again. Now, intent to visit is a very unique metric, and it is necessarily time-bound. It is when people are actually making plans to do something. As you all may know, somebody having interest in something is very different than someone intending to do something. So for instance, I'm very interested right now in teleporting to Orlando, because that's top of mind right now. I'm very interested in teleporting to Atlanta, but do I intend right now to teleport to Orlando? No, I don't know how to teleport. We're in the middle of a presentation. I don't want to leave you guys hanging. That'd be pretty rude. So there are a lot of reasons why we don't always do the things that we intend to do. Some of them are, technical barriers. Some of them are simply, so for instance, I'm interested in going to Iceland, but I may not choose during my first vacation to go to Iceland. I may choose to go to Rome instead. Doesn't mean I'm not interested in going to Iceland. I'd just rather go to Rome, or I'd rather go to Timbuktu or Santa Fe or wherever it is, or see my mom or anything like that. So again, we're looking at intent, and intent tends to closely correlate with actual visitation. Now we've cut the data into 2 bars, and this is why listening to the data is listening to the sound of my voice is important. That blue bar, it looks like it's important to mention that what is rural and what is urban? We use the census definition of urban. And that means that that's a place that has over 10,000 people per square mile and has a downtown district with a suburban area. Rural areas tend to be at least or more than 50 miles from a major urban or suburban area. Now, what's important to acknowledge here is that 80% of the United States is in an urban area. So even those things, though these things are both on the same chart, 80% of people are in that blue bar, okay? So many more people are in terms of just numbers, are represented in that blue bar than that orange bar. But I wanted to cut it out for you so you could kind of see, because it would be a really reasonable question to ask if we see any big differences. So in answer to that question, we were curious to know, we've cut the data for both. Now, this is great news. This is great news. We tend to see that over time, there's some things that are different right now than things that we tend to see in previous years. And here's why it's such good news. We do tend to see that the percentage of people in each category tends to increase. So if we were to cut this for a similar, so for Q1 2019 or 18, it would look a little bit more, it would be a little bit less, have that little less of that belly right in the middle that we're seeing. But what's happening here is that we have disrupted people's visitor engagement cycles. There's a bit of pent up demand. There are people sitting at home with numb legs after binge watching The Queen's Gambit for a second time, thinking, I cannot wait until I can go to that cultural institution or to that art museum. And so we're seeing here an increase in between 1 to 3 months from now. Now that's a really good time period that encompasses the start of summertime, which we like. And you can see that between 3 and 6 months from now, between 6 months and a year from now, and more than a year from now. We wanted to show this to you for a pretty simple reason. And it's just to show you that indeed, people do intend to visit. So this is amongst people who do intend to visit. When do they intend to visit? So this could help you with your planning and your thinking. Now, again, remember that rollout's going to be slow, just like we showed you in that market potential, but there are people who intend to visit, and this is when they're making the plans to do so. And we may, especially those institutions that are going to benefit from the redistribution of demand, see these starting to be realized in the upcoming months as the vaccination rolls out.
Okay, so during this, we often get the question when we get to this point, well, is that potential, is that demand the same for everyone? Is the market potential the same for everyone? And of course not, right? I mean, it varies a lot. And what we've found as we've watched this over the past more than a year is that there are a number of factors that are really will be the biggest factors in determining how well attendance recovers. And the first one is really the local conditions. Like what is it like in your area? And what are the perceptions of people in your area? What are they willing to tolerate? That we found that varies considerably from not only state to state, region to region, but even kind of city to city within a state. So that's something that's important for you to kind of have a handle on. The second thing is that your organization's messaging and awareness. From the very beginning of this, we saw this data that told us that those organizations that didn't just sort of hide, right? Just saying, okay, let's just hunker down and ride this out. Those organizations are not as successful when it comes to reopening as those that said, okay, well, let's pivot to digital. Let's stay top of mind. Let's keep the awareness level high. Let's engage with visitors in the way they want to be engaged with, which has, for the past year, has been online. The third, the next one is the constituency. Like who are your visitors? And again, that's one of the things we said. Some organizations are seeing a slower recovery or didn't see as much attendance during the pandemic because their constituencies were actually a little bit older, right? And those people were the more cautious people who didn't go. Whereas others who have a younger audience are definitely seeing a different situation. And then finally, as Colleen just referred to, and we talked about redistribution of demand, what kind of organization are you? And there's so many factors in that. How much of your experience is outside compared to inside? What's Is it crowded? Again, we see this performing arts having more difficulty because the perception of people sitting close together, as opposed to a museum where people can kind of be spread out, or a zoo that's pretty much almost all outdoors, or a park that's totally outdoors. So all of those factors are really, really important in what that curve will look like as you recover. So let's just, again, summarize this section up. Attendance is not currently projected to fully recover until 2023. Again, this just says this is the time to focus on recovery, right? And Colleen said it very well. The reason we tell people this is so that they'll set some expectations and they understand what the key thing is. And the really, really important thing now is to develop the strategies that help you recover. Because first you've got to recover before you can grow. And so recovery is the name of the game this year and potentially into next year.
Mm-hmm. And for those of you who may be wondering, can market potential change for the industry? Most certainly. If this variant is worse than we think, if something happens that we don't see coming, it most certainly will change. We will post these similar charts. We'll keep you posted on Know Your Own Bone, and we'll be sure over time if we see big changes in vaccination rollouts or the variant is changing behaviors and market potential, we will keep folks posted on Know Your Own Bone. So what will make people feel safe? Let's talk about it, right? Right now, one of the biggest barriers to visiting is the coronavirus and safety-related concerns. So how can we overcome those? Now, this one's an interesting one. This is an interesting question. What is the top factor that people say will make them feel safe visiting arts entities?
All right, put your answers in. Give you
no hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer is not making or breaking it for anyone.
I don't know if that, yeah, the touch thing is less now, right?
Right. It's a good point.
All right. Apologies if you can hear.
Ooh, this is so exciting. We've got a good split here. All right. So the data that you're about to see, ooh, this is going to be fun. I like the way you guys think. What we did is we went into market and we are monitoring this on an ongoing basis. And we asked people an open-ended query. The jargon for that is lexical analysis. And we said to them via open-ended question, hey, what will make you feel safe visiting a exhibit-based institution again? So we would use, museum, zoo, aquarium, or visiting a performance-based institution again, theater, symphony, opera, ballet, dance troupe, the like. Now what we did was we spent 2 weeks in market collecting the answers, and then we redeployed the list of questions back to people. So for them to tell us which is the most important to them. And here were the results. So this is a long way of saying we didn't come up with these. The market came up with these options. And here's what they are. Number one, it's close. Number one, and it has been number one for quite a while, is mandatory face coverings. What? Let's talk about that in a second. I have a next slide that's going to dive into the data on mandatory face coverings. So hold your response, because we totally had it too. Mandatory face coverings. Now remember, this is for people who actually go to cultural organizations. So what would make you feel safe? And most people are saying mandatory face coverings. Yes, most people throughout the entirety of the United States. And that isn't just limited to the North or the South. And I'll show you the data on that in a second. The second one, and it's silly to call it second because it's so close, is the availability of the coronavirus vaccine. Of course, that's people saying, I'm going to feel comfortable visiting again when we reach herd immunity and more people have the vaccination. Third is the ability to be outdoors or outside. And again, you can see this cut. I should probably say this at the outset. The orange bar is of course cut for those institutions that we tested on exhibit-based, that were exhibit-based institutions, and blue were those that were performance-based. But what's interesting on the whole is that they're rather similar to one another. We can see that performance-based audiences are a bit more sensitive, and that's important to keep in mind. But we don't see some massive changes, which is interesting in and of itself. But the ability to be outdoors or outside, and that's something we want to think about in terms of solutions as we move forward over the next few years, or things to keep in mind over the next few years. Seeing others visit. What that means is that people will feel comfortable visiting again, essentially when going to a cultural organization or an arts institution is normalized behavior again. This is particularly true for exhibit-based. I'll feel more comfortable going to the museum when I see that more other people are feeling comfortable going to the museum. There's that, density of belief that contributes to people being like, okay, this is the thing we're doing again. This is the thing we're doing. And of course, reasonably, we see that a little bit less, notably less for performance-based institutions, right? Because there's perceived to be less freedom of movement in general for performance-based institutions on the whole. No necessary changes. I feel safe and comfortable. Now, some people, we presented this data and some people have said, see, that means we don't have to do anything. Well, consider that if you're reaching 40.5% of attendance on a year that you're only going to be reaching 70.5% of attendance, how low that potential is to reach audiences. Avoiding long lines of people, organizations choosing to reopen. That's people who said, hey, and this is important, people saying, hey, just your decision. We do know, we have a lot of data about how trusted arts entities are as community assets. And that's the belief that, hey, if you're telling us you're open, you wouldn't tell us you wouldn't be open unless it was safe. So there are some percentage of people who are saying, hey, I trust that it's going to be a safe experience just because they're open and they're a trustworthy institution and they wouldn't put us at risk. Exclusive hours for vulnerable populations. This is notably bigger for performances. Limits on crowds. You can see that's also notably bigger for performances. Availability of treatments and therapies. The government lifting travel movement restrictions. Those are people who say, hey, we're allowed to go. If the government says we're allowed to go, then it must be safe. So there's that. Hand sanitizer. Wah wah. You guys were right. It's not the first one. Knowing facility cleaning procedures, antibody testing or passport program, and elimination of on-site food service. Now, this is data that we've been tracking over time. We've seen big changes in this. Mandatory face coverings and availability of coronavirus vaccine have been at the top, and also being outdoors have been at the top since institutions have started reopening. So, I want to say since the summertime. Or after that, right? Those have been the two for a while, but you can go back on Know Your Own Bone to see kind of where things stacked up. So these are the things that people will say will make them feel safe. And given that coronavirus is such a big barrier, it's important for us to acknowledge these things. So let's talk about masks for a second. Dun, dun, dun. All right, so take a second, find your state at the bottom. Now, not all states are represented here. These are the most densely populated states in the United States and groups of states in the United States. So I want to acknowledge that not every state in the United States is on this. But I will say that the data is there and follows this trend that we're about to share. We asked people, all right, how essential is requiring mandatory face coverings for all staff members, volunteers, and guests to your decision to visit cultural organizations? Now, let me say that another way. How uncomfortable are you by not having masks is essentially what this question is saying. On a scale of 1 to 10, how uncomfortable are you? How essential is requiring masks? In this data, the number to beat is 7. If you're in a state that is over 7, that's where we start to say, so we can really drill it down for different institutions, but that's where we start to be like, well, we're losing significant and notable attendance by not requiring masks. Now, some of you are saying, wait, how is this possible? Masks are such a polarizing topic, and indeed they are. When we open this up to the entirety of the United States, including people who don't have interest in going to cultural organizations, indeed, these numbers are different. But we see a significant correlation between educational attainment and the belief that masks should be required and the likelihood to visit a cultural organization. In other words, the kind of people who actually go to cultural organizations tend to be, on the whole, the kind of people who really believe in the science of masks. So indeed, we're talking about an audience here. What this data means is that for some institutions, there's a bigger risk to your attendance to not requiring masks than there is to requiring masks. Now, this is a complicated topic. This is a topic that gives people a lot of feelings. This is a topic that makes some people really angry when we present it. This is just the facts, ma'am and sirs. This is just the high sample data from these states put together in terms of how uncomfortable are you with masks. We do know, of course, that there are different regulations for different states, different counties. There are different things that are going on, that this is a complicated situation. On the whole, the people who visit cultural organizations tend to be the kind of people who care very much about mandatory mask coverings. Jim, is there anything that you'd add that I might have missed?
No, in fact, I would repeat what you said again, because the kind of people who go to cultural organizations are people who really want masks. And that's just so critical to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. That there are people who will say, I'm not going to do that because masks aren't required. And the people who are likely to say that are the kind of people who would actually go if they were required.
Okay, so just again, we've repeated this 3 times now, but it's just really important. The people who are attending cultural organizations generally require mask mandates to feel safe. And that's what you want, is for people to feel safe and to be safe. And I mean, we've tracked this weekly, and it's just so clear, like that this has been consistent throughout from when masks first started to appear. Because remember, there was a period there when there was some question marks about masks. When masks first started to appear, we've just seen this being very, very consistent and durable, that it's a requirement. Good. So why don't we move on to the next one, Colleen?
All right. Now, this is a fast one. There's a lot of data in this one. And some of this we'll hit on because you probably already know it, and it may be very validating to you. But we're seeing some differences in how people are choosing to travel right now. So what do you think? What length of trips do people prefer to take right now? Day trips, overnight, weekend, or week-long? People in the United States, what's the preferred way to travel? Or preferred length of travel, I should say.
All right, take a minute to vote. I always have the urge to, this is me on this question. Like, I'm doing this one, except I'm not traveling anywhere because we have a toddler, and trying to take a toddler anywhere is fun, even when there's not a pandemic. All right, let me see. Responses are slowing. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share those results.
All right, you guys are a good Who Wants to Be a Millionaire crowd, because you hit the nail on the head. Here are the results. Indeed, how people prefer to travel is different right now, and it may remain different for a little bit of time. But as you can see, here you can see the data cut for end of year 2018, end of year 2019, and end of year 2021. People prefer day trips already, but now during the pandemic, there's for us that 9.9%. That's almost a 10% increase, less than that, but nearly a 10% increase in the percent of people who prefer to take a day trip during the pandemic. You can see that there's a decrease in overnight, the decrease in weekend, and the decrease in week-long. This is for all people traveling in the United States, not just museum goers or people or performance-based institution goers. This is national, very much national overall preferences right now. And we're also seeing that how people travel have changed. People prefer to travel right now via their own vehicle, less by airplanes, which is almost cut in half, or it has actually cut in half. Prefer to bike and walk. We're getting some more air. We all love our mid-afternoon walk, right? Rental vehicles gone down, others gone down, trains gone down, and motor bus and motor coach has gone down. Of course, presumably so that people can be safe. If you're in your own vehicle, you are with your squad, you're with your group. It's perceived to be a safer activity. So these things, and we'll talk about, so there's thing 1, preferring day trips, so shorter trips. Thing 2, that people are preferring to travel via personal vehicle. And thing 3 is that how people are picking their leisure activities or their leisure destinations, not activities, has changed. Now there's a lot on this, so we're going to take a second here to really think about this. And again, you guys can revisit this data. But again, it's cut for end of year 2018 and 2019. Now, why would we show you end of year 2018 and 2019? Well, we wanted to show you how durable this usually is, right? Because it wouldn't really mean much if we just showed you 2019 and 2020 and we saw big changes, because the question would be, well, was this data durable before? Like, are these changes significant? Do they change every year? And you can see that generally they're pretty close in years prior to 2019. It also goes back 2017, 16. But we saw some really big changes at end of year 2020. And we saw that again, still, well, I guess number one used to be visiting a major metropolitan area. And that has gone down dramatically. That used to be the top way that people decided what they were going to do. And it was second to visiting family or friends. We've seen that visiting family and friends has gone down. Proximity to waterfront has gone up as people want to get out of their homes and experience more of nature. Visiting historic locations has gone up. There's a perception that specifically historic sites may have opportunities that are outdoors in addition to indoors, but potentially predominantly outdoors is the public perception. Going hiking, visiting a park, and playing golf. Of course, those things shouldn't surprise us, right? These are outdoor activities, and we're seeing that people are choosing their destinations based on these activities. And then you see some things that have really plummeted. Wah wah. Attending a sporting event, attending a museum. That is, as you saw the data, there is a redistribution demand toward museums right now, especially ones that are perceived to be big. This is how people are deciding what city to go to. So just because they're going to the city doesn't mean they're not going to visit the museum. This is how they're deciding what city to visit or what community or what area to go to. So museum isn't, the top driver right now of how they're making those decisions, even if they are going to go when they get there or not. Unique dining is plummeted, unique shopping is plummeting, attended a concert has gone down, and attending a theatrical performance. Now you already see an opportunity, right? We're like, an opportunity here is this: if we are a performance-based institution, that opportunity to move things into bigger spaces, if we can do it outside and changing up the perception, right? We see an opportunity here to change the perception that in order to experience a performance-based institution, you have to be stationary in an enclosed space for a long period of time. And that's an opportunity for us. We can work to change that perception. But right now, we certainly see that perception that may be something that's attendant to performance-based institutions right now. So these three travel situations have changed. So these travel preferences are also changing how people visit. When you combine that people want shorter trips, and they want the flexibility of traveling via their own cars, we're also seeing that people have what we call shorter lead days to visit. What that means is that this is what you're looking at, is the number of days between when somebody decides to visit a cultural institution and when they actually walk in the door. And you can see that number has gone down. And that's because people right now tend to visit institutions that they can drive to or take a day trip to. They're doing a lot of other things, but that's the majority of what's driving this here, is the flexibility of, hey, I haven't been to this cultural institution that's in my community or the next city over. This is a great excuse to go to that institution. And because it's not far away, I don't need 6 months or 3 months to plan that visit. I can plan it for the end of this week because things aren't really open at the same rate that they were in 2019. So I can mobilize that decision a lot faster than I had in the past. So we want to show you the point of this is that people are making that decision more quickly and thus visiting more local or near institutions for them. And also, they are redeeming their tickets more quickly. So right now, you can see March 2020 and February 2021, you can see that people are, when they do buy their tickets, now this is based on people who bought online, okay? Because it's difficult to purchase more than 28 days in advance on site and then come back again in 28 days. So this particular data set contemplates online and mobile purchases for 21 institutions in the United States. And we are seeing that redemption times have also decreased. People they are able to be more flexible than usual. There's less competition right now, but we are planning that that competition does stand to increase over time. So when you combine all these things together, that how people are traveling is making for people going to local institutions or local, not even local, regional, pan-regional institutions that they could drive to or they can easily get to on their own because they're seeing a decrease in national travel that is slowly increasing now, but it's not fully there yet by any stretch of the imagination. We're seeing a change in who visits. And these are my two favorite slides that in the whole presentation. Now, this data is specifically for exhibit-based institutions, both of these two slides. Why? Well, there aren't as many performance-based institutions that were open for as long as exhibit-based institutions in 2020. So we have this data right now for exhibit-based institutions. We're watching it for 2021, also for exhibit-based, but for performance-based as well. There just weren't enough performance-based institutions open for a majority of 2020 to get this same level of high confidence data and research for performance-based because of the nature of the coronavirus and closures. So what you're looking at is the percentage of first-time and non-recent visitors to 127 exhibit-based institutions in the United States. A non-recent visitor is a person who hasn't visited in the last 3 years or longer. And indeed, this is a makeup of first-time visitors and non-recent visitors. And this is incredibly exciting. Due to these things, where we're activating local audiences who maybe haven't had an excuse to come visit us in the past and are saying, all right, where can we go that we drive to? Well, I've really wanted to go to this art museum. I've really wanted to go to this institution, are saying, hey, this is a great excuse to go. And we really are, or did in 2020, see an increase in people who are first-time and non-recent visitors. That means that we are activating inactive visitors, some of those people who are in our markets who are saying, I am interested in going to the art museum, but I haven't been yet. Now, the circumstances related to the pandemic are activating a higher percentage of people to come and make the trip. This is terrifically exciting because, again, we're trying to reach more people. We're trying to welcome more people, right? So it's good to see that this is happening. One question we often get when we present this is, wait, why was it going down before 2020, right? The reason it was going down is because the institutions on the whole were getting really good at audience research, figuring out what the kind of people who already go really like, and developing programs and opportunities for the people who already go. That's not a problem because that is an opportunity for membership, which can be utilized to, and subscribers for performance-based, you know, when this data comes out for performance-based. So it's not a problem in that way, but it is a problem when we're thinking about the whole other opportunity, which is equally, if not even more important, which is welcoming more people in our doors over time so that we can continue to go up and to the right. Now, this is cool. One question we often get is, I mentioned before, the number one most shared characteristic of any person in the United States who's been to any cultural organization type in the last 2 years is that they self-identify as a white, non-Hispanic individual. That's a problem because that's the number one most shared characteristic. I smell an opportunity. It's not a surprising opportunity. You all know it. You've all been talking about it. But when you see data like this, a question is, well, are people who self-identify as BIPOC or non-white audiences or who aren't in that really homogenous group of people who, from a racial and ethnic standpoint, who visit cultural organizations, are we activating more racially or ethnically diverse audiences? And the answer is yes. So this is what you're looking at here is the percentage of people in the previous slide who self-identify as non-white. Now, this is problematic language. I'm gonna call it out at the outset. Why is this problematic? Why aren't we calling these people BIPOC? We've run into an issue with our data where not everybody who self-identifies as non-white self-identifies as BIPOC. And why is this problematic? It's problematic because it's white-centric. And for us to indeed get better in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, it will benefit us to stop being so white-centric so that we can continue, so that welcoming new audiences is just a part of what we do. And they become less of an other, people who are different than this homogenized group in any way, age, in household income, physical ability or disability. They become a part of our audiences as opposed to a part of an other that we have special conversations about welcoming. But right now we need to have these conversations because we need to become more welcoming to a whole host of other kinds of people than the kinds of people who are currently on the whole visiting cultural organizations, who tend to be highly educated, not racially and ethnically diverse, and tend to be wealthier than the average population. So we've got an opportunity, right? And this is great news. This is great news. The circumstances are allowing for trial of new audiences. So the opportunity is when new folks, first-time visitors or non-recent visitors come on site, no matter who they are, no matter what they think, no matter where they live, no matter where they're from, we want them to have the best possible experience so that we can make them into regular cultural organization goers.
Yeah, so again, I'm sure you've noted Colleen's excitement about these slides. I share that because this is historic. We've never seen this happen. This is just, I mean, it's an amazing thing that's happening. These travel preferences related to the pandemic are activating new audiences. I mean, let that sink in for a minute. But also remember, you never get a second chance to make a good first impression. So the key here, the really important thing is that we embrace the new audiences, that we embrace this idea and make people feel welcome and show them why this is a wonderful place, why our performances are so great, and why this is such a wonderful place to come back to. So this is really, really, really important.
All right, and the change maker. The change maker is digital engagement. What do you think? How many more minutes per day do you think people spend online in 2021 than in 2019 on average? The average American.
Who feels like you're always online?
Hand up.
Yeah.
I'm up.
Oh God, I'm so addicted to my phone.
Me too.
The way we communicate right now. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds.
Ooh, I like it. You guys are spending, I'm not going to project and say that you guys are really spending a lot of time online, but it looks like maybe some of you guys are really spending a ton of time online. Now let's look at it. What's the answer? I mean, we all are. Who's not spending a lot of time online? Let's look at the answer. The answer is actually 81 minutes. Why is that surprising? Because even before the pandemic, we spent a lot of time online. We just can't go leave our homes anymore. We were just online at work. We were just on our phones when we were on the bus. We were just on the phones while we were waiting for the bus. We were just on the phones when checking things when we were at the grocery store in line. And now we're doing it all from home. So, but anyway, an increase in an hour and a half of time, almost nearly an hour and a half every day, is a huge increase in percent share of the day. What you're looking at here is a media consumption study, end of year 2019 and end of year 2020. This is for overall people in the United States spending time on digital sites, so social media, mobile websites, TV. Now, this is where Netflix, Hulu, satellite, those normal cord, not cord cutters are in TV as well. So it's also traditional television. And then you can also see radio and print. And you can see that we had a notable increase in people spending time online. Now, a thing about share of media consumption studies is that they are not mutually exclusive. If somebody is scrolling Instagram while they're watching the Queen's Gambit, that's going to be a minute in digital and a minute in TV. So some of these minutes are double counted if people are doing two things at the same time. But the point is, people are spending a lot of time on digital platforms. And what about the kind of people who go to museums or cultural institutions? They are spending even more time online. These are US adult high propensity visitors. These are people who have the demographic, psychographic, and behavioral attributes that tend to indicate an increased likelihood, of course, to visit cultural organizations, both exhibit or performance-based. And you can see this, look, they already were spending even more time online, and now they're spending even more time online. The kind of people who go to cultural organizations are the kind of people who tend to spend a lot of time online. And again, as you could see, most people in the United States are spending more time online, indeed, in light of the pandemic. So I wanted to show you that. But does that mean that more people, this is data cut for Q1 of 2021, this is cut for people who actually visited. Oh, apologies for that, 2019 too. It's just 2019. So it's end of year 2019 and Q1 of 2021. So people who just recently visited as of April 1st, they had visited. And this is the percentage that used each of these platforms in order to obtain information related to their visit within the last 12 months of their visit, or who visited in the last 12 months. And what you can see is mobile web, and social media are the top places that people are going to inform their visits. And it slightly increased during the pandemic, but already these numbers were really high. So does this mean that more people are spending time engaging with cultural organizations online right now? The answer is yes. You've got end of year 2019 and end of year 2020 is in orange. And you can see that even though institutions, this is both performance and exhibit-based combined right now, even though many institutions have been closed in the United States and people haven't been visiting at the same levels, a higher percentage of people in the United States have visited an organization's website. A higher percentage have also followed on social media, and they haven't even been able to visit the same levels. They've spoken with a friend, and some of them haven't even been recently. They've noticed a news story. A higher percentage of people in the United States have posted or like to post on social media from a cultural organization. These things are really important for us to know because it shows us that not only are audiences online, but they're also interacting with us more online, even though, as you can see, that the visited number dropped, even though the percentage of people who report having visited has gone down dramatically. So people were still top of mind. People are still talking about those institutions that are leveraging that opportunity. And let's talk about what happens on site too. Digital's really important. So let's say we get people out of their houses, right? Now they're definitely going to put away their phones, right? Those people who are visiting museums right now, they're finally out of their homes. They're totally putting their phones down. Aren't they so sick of their phones? Oh no, they sure aren't. Sure are not. This is the percentage of people cut for end of year 2019 compared to, again, data that was cut just this April 1st, who used these platforms on site in a way that relates to their visit. And you can see the percentage of people in 2021 who use social media on site to take a selfie, to look something up, to find the great place to take the best photo on site in a way that relates to their visit has increased to 62.9% of people in the United States. Mobile web has increased. This makes sense. People using their phone. And this is, again, in relation to their visit. So they may be looking up additional information about an artist, information about a scientific fact or a historic fact, or looking up a composer or a conductor or even an artist, of course, or performer. And then, of course, you can see that decrease in word of mouth interpersonal. We're seeing less, that's on-site interactions that are happening face-to-face. We're seeing fewer of those, of course, because institutions tend to want to adhere to social distancing and are being cautious of that. And you can see, of course, peer review web includes places like Yelp and TripAdvisor, direct mail, newspaper, periodical, and web. Why is web so low? That's because that's people who actually brought their laptop to the theater or to the museum or to the organization.
So again, we'll say this again. We say this like 10 times per presentation. Meet your audiences where they are, and right now they're online, and that's what the name of the game right now. And at the same time, by continuing to engage with people, we're showing them that we are a community asset, and that's really, really critical. We need to demonstrate our relevance and our worth. Okay, Colleen, you want to move on to the next section?
We're in the home stretch. Digital engagement during the pandemic is influencing how quickly some entities are recovering. Right now, we're finding that those who engaged on social media are recovering faster than those that stopped. has elevated expectations surrounding ongoing digital engagement. People expect institutions to be answering questions on social media and to be active on social media. And it's increased perceptions that organizations may be relevant beyond their walls. People were still talking about you even when you weren't open. It's not the need for arts entities' missions that's changed. It's the physical conditions in which you carry them out and how people are responding to them. And that's important for you all to note. This doesn't mean, of course, you all know it, but it doesn't hurt to say it again. Your jobs don't matter less. Arguably, they matter even more, because we need to find new ways to bring our missions and our art and all of the great, education and inspiration that we bring to people, given the current conditions and barriers that surround the pandemic.
Good. We'll kind of wrap it up, just summarize what we've said. We'll go through this really, really quickly so we can get on to the questions. But these are the main findings that will help you recover. Know that it's going to take a while, right? It's going to take some work and strategic thinking. It's really critical that people feel safe when they visit. This is the time to appeal to local and regional audiences, given the changes in visitation that we're seeing. And this is just, again, we emphasize it one more time. You never get a second chance to make a good first impression. And our new visitors are really critical. It's a historic moment for us, and it's really an opportunity. And finally, meet audiences where they are. They're online. And again, as we said before, show that you are a community asset, and not only show it, but be it and demonstrate it.
There's still a lot of work to do. This is your moment. Use data to light your path. And on that note, we're going to turn it over to Eric. And of course, LaVon Bracy Davis. And we are going to take some questions and talk about things.
Wow. What phenomenal data and conversation. I'm over here, I've taken pages and pages of just notes with just the great data. So thank you so much, Jim and Colleen, for such great research and great presentation. The time just flew by. I have a question, and then Eric, I'll turn it over to you to read some of the questions in the comments. So within the discussion, you mentioned a lot of words that we have probably utilized much more than we would want to in the midst of this pandemic. Words like pivot, words like distance. I never heard of the phrase social distance, quite honestly, before the pandemic. But there was one word I think you made mention to, Colleen, furlough. And yeah, and I'd like to talk a little bit, or just get your input, both of you actually, or if there's any data to support it. But given the use, you just mentioned it, Jim, that there's so much online engagement, and the mode of communication and performance and is online. And so what does that mean for staffing, organizational staffing? As mentioned in the opening, I work for a performing arts center, and I know furloughs are very, very real. And if the engagement is online, and if the next step is engaging online, that is not as hopeful as we would want it to be for staff members who need to be in a venue to actually work. I mean, even as going down to your bartenders or whatever. So, okay, I'm talking too much. I'd love to hear from you what your thought is on furlough and those staff members and engaging.
Oh no, you are not. You are exactly right. That is something, one thing that one gut reaction that we've seen some people, some executives have to this kind of research is, oh, great, this gives us permission to get rid of all of the incredible people that tell our stories on site and online and are the reason that we exist, which is totally the opposite of, exactly to your point, is totally the opposite of how we're going to be successful. So we're encouraging folks, and this is, a marathon, not a sprint, is that really the people, if any of you, all of you, I can see some of your faces, if any of you who do social media, firsthand, you're getting questions in the middle of the night. People expect really easy questions sometimes, questions about your hours. You're getting questions all the time, and it's increasingly a 24/7 job, not to mention content creation. And now that expectations have increased, making sure that we're telling our stories. So one thing that we're encouraging executives to do is to keep those people who are bridges to our communities on site, but also they help tell our stories online too, because we need content creators and we need those people to find those stories. We need those people to think of ideas for personal interactions and personal connections online too. So exactly to your point, exactly, there is that risk of seeing this and thinking, oh, great, this is, online's easy, it's free. Online, of course, as we all know, as everybody here knows, it's not easy, it's not free, it is 24/7, it is ongoing, and it does need support. So we're trying to open people's eyes to, hey, don't take away the people who tell the stories. We need the people who tell the stories to be relevant. Jim, would you add anything?
Yeah, it's an and, it's not an or. I mean, and it's critical though, because what happened is that the pace of change with digital went much, much faster than our ability to understand it and respond to it. And so what we ended up with was looking at, okay, the digital engagement is like somebody's part-time job. That's how we started it. And then we it's a full-time job. It's 2 full-time jobs, it's 3, who knows? The digital is not, we may see a little bit of a dip when things are back to normal, but it's been on this upward climb since we've been tracking the data, and I don't think that upward climb is going to stop. So it's critical. But on the other hand, as Colleen said, the people who make us what we are the people who tell our stories, and the people who, the customer service is the single most important factor in our success and satisfaction in terms of what we do on site. And so we need to somehow expand our thinking and to get more people in our organizations involved in digital, right? I mean, there's a whole bunch of ideas here, but it needs to be and. Right?
Absolutely. And then I have a comment that perhaps will lead into a question, but I just want to say that I appreciate that you put in terms of participation and coming back some data on the BIPOC community, and because I think that's very, very important. I think you mentioned, Jim, in the beginning, that not only were we in the midst of a pandemic, but there also was some social justice change that was happening in our country, literally at the same time in the midst of a pandemic. And I think we all will agree that representation matters. So appreciate that part of this discussion. And I am looking forward to additional discussions as it relates to the BIPOC community, and ensuring that as we safely open our doors and thinking about what audiences come back, how we can engage in a community, in communities that have been not represented or underrepresented in these discussions, in the data, and in our venues and all of that. So appreciate that. Do you all have any comments as it relates to the minority community or BIPOC community? Yeah.
I do. So we are grateful to work with a lot of board members and executive leaders throughout the United States. And sometimes, depending on who we're talking to, we run the risk of people thinking that when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, we're talking about a warm fuzzy. We're just talking about a feel good. But what I want to take this opportunity to underscore is that we can't survive as institutions unless we get better at reaching BIPOC audiences and people who look, think, act, also different ages, different physical abilities and disabilities. If we don't become more welcoming on the whole, as you saw in the beginning, our attendance, it will decrease over time. We call this, the phrase for this is the negative substitution of the historic visitor. We are losing audiences at a faster rate than they are being replaced. So if any of you in any of your work come across any pushback about, oh, well, that's secondary, engaging BIPOC audience is secondary, it's primary. It's also a business imperative as well.
That's great. With that, Jim, unless you have anything to add, Eric, I'll turn it over to you. I do believe there is a question, Eric or Bethany, in the chat.
Yes, thank you, LaVon. I actually have a couple questions that were sent directly to me that I thought I'd go ahead and ask. First one, do you think that the current pent-up demand, the increase in newly activated visitors, is a temporary bubble? If not, how can arts groups kind of harness it more permanently?
Jim, I'll let you start with this one.
Well, yeah, again, it's this, Is it a temporary bubble? I mean, we don't know, because we hope not. It could be, but it goes back to embracing people when they come back. Reach out to our best friends, our members, our supporters, our donors, these people who have supported us all along. Though we really need to keep their support, but at the same time, we need to be reaching out to new audiences, and not just reaching out, but embracing new audiences. I think that's what will keep this from being, a bubble that pops. If the one statistic that is the most important that you heard was about activating new audiences, because that's the one that presents the greatest opportunity for the future. And that's the way that we will keep this. We will start to, and believe me, having been through this in my 15 years at the Monterey Bay Aquarium, where we really, really worked hard at engaging new audiences. It's not a sprint. It is a marathon, and it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of time, but this almost gives us a jump start. It's sort of a silver lining of the pandemic, if you will. So I think that the way that we will keep this from being a bubble that pops is to embrace new audiences. Colleen?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. We have this opportunity right now. We don't know if it'll stick. Our projections suggest that it may be a slow decline in 2021, that it probably won't go straight back down to where it was, because it's looking like, and we're following places like Israel who are more vaccinated than us, and what are they doing surrounding cultural institutions, and it's looking like it's going to be slow, just like we saw with the distribution of demand. So hopefully we can still continue to activate local audiences for a while and get them to trial our institutions, and maybe they'll love us so much that they come on site and they become members, or they come on site and they just have such a good time that they tell their friends and they can't wait to come back. So the goal right now is, hey, we have this opportunity. How do we leverage it to really maximize it? And then make sure that what we're learning from these audiences, right? We have new audiences that are coming through our doors. But what we learn from these audiences that are new, how do we integrate these things so that we can keep on going up and to the right and welcoming people who are less homogenous than individuals who may traditionally visit cultural institutions?
Great, thank you both. I have a couple more questions. Let me start with this one. Are you seeing any data that hybridized experiences that are set for both in-person and digital at the same time, are becoming an expected part of an experience beyond, say, photo ops for Instagram? I guess, in other words, do institutions need to keep that top of mind to bring in visitors as we move forward?
Can I ask you one more time? Repeat the question. Sorry.
No problem. Are you seeing any data that hybridized experiences, so those experiences that are both in-person and digital at the same time, are becoming expected part of an experience at, for visitors, either in, performance-based or exhibit-based?
Got it. Yes. Yes. Got it. Binary. The cut dry answer to that question is yes. We are seeing increased expectations that institutions will be competent online and adequately engage online and increasingly go above and beyond online. So we are seeing right now, so for instance, we are seeing right now that is emerging as a barrier is, as an access challenge, is the perception that institutions do not answer questions. We're like, where is that coming from? Why is this suddenly emerging in the data that people are perceiving that cultural institutions aren't going to be responsive to requests? And it's because people perceive that institutions that aren't active on social media just aren't going to answer their questions. So why try to overcome, some of the basic barriers to attending? So this is my way of saying that, yes, the expectations that we will be not only competent online, but helpful online and connect with individuals online is something that we're absolutely seeing in the data. But an exciting note is that something else we've seen in the data is the perception that institutions are relevant beyond their walls. So that's the plus of it, is that as community assets, and we're hoping that entities can leverage this in the long run from a philanthropic standpoint. We're seeing an increase in the perception that institutions are assets to their community, because they showed, even when they weren't open, that they still provided value to at-home parents, to those of us who are sitting at home watching the Queen's Gambit. I keep on bringing up the Queen's Gambit. I saw the comment. I just love it, guys. But who are sitting at home doing their thing. Yeah, there's that opportunity there for sure.
I'd add to that something in the data, the implication of the data that I hope we didn't miss, but people are, in some ways, people are meeting us online first. In other words, it's like our entrance. It's like a new, and that is so critical. When you looked at one of the charts, more people are engaging online than in person. Now, part of that is capacity constraints, but whatever, but it's still, it gives you some idea of the magnitude and the importance of this, but more importantly, the opportunity of it, right? If we have people who are coming to us online, we've got them coming to us, and that is so critical. It's just so to your point, Eric, the hybridization of the experience, it's already happening, right? It's like the experience isn't just coming to visit you. It's like what happens from the moment that they reach out to you, maybe whether it's online or however, until the moment that they not just leave, but then engage with you afterwards. So there's already sort of this need for making sure that all of that is cohesive, right, and integrated.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Colleen. I'm going to try and squeeze one final question in before we wrap up today. I just got a question came through chat about outdoor arts festivals. There have been a number of them have been canceled for this summer. And with the data showing that people feel safer outdoors and spread out, and there's a lot of pent up demand, do you know if there are any reasons, do you have any hunches as to why so many of them had to cancel this summer, even with the increased vaccination? Was it a lack of lead time maybe for, organizing them, or is there anything that you can see or in the data that points to why that may be?
That's a good one for you, Jim, given the festivals, your festival work.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's a good point. I mean, I think that varies a lot from state to state. I know in Colorado where I am, I know a lot of things that are outdoors are starting to sort of come back, even farmers markets, for instance. So I don't know. I saw the same thing with an arts festival here, outdoor arts festival that was canceled, and I was surprised because it was, I mean, maybe the rate of vaccination is going faster than we had anticipated, and that's why we kind of feel safer right now than maybe we did. If you were making this decision 3 months ago, you may not have taken it all into account. So I don't know, but I do agree. I wish maybe some of those things could be rethought, because it does seem like that outdoor setting is huge.
Colleen, do you have anything to add?
No, I think, yep, nope. Nope, sure don't.
How about you, LaVon? I saw you unmuted yourself.
Oh, well, I just thought, and I'm not a panelist, just the moderator, but I just thought with outdoor festivals, there may be a thought that you actually can be closer outdoors, like with mosh pits, and there's not that distancing that seats will allow inside if you're in like a performing arts space. So that may be a reason, as with an outdoor festival, you can kind of get as close as to people, and sometimes closer than a seat will allow. With a seat, you can put a seat in between. If you're outdoors and you're just standing, we've all been to concerts with mosh pits, and so you can be a little bit closer. So that's just a thought only, and that's coming from me working at an art center who has an outdoor venue with socially distant boxes for the purposes of forcing distance as opposed to just an open green space. My thoughts.
Thank you so much, LaVon. And we are now a little bit past 5:30 p.m. Eastern, so I want to thank you, LaVon, Jim, Colleen, Bethany, for presenting today and running us through this, and thank you everybody for participating.